Hey everybody. Before we get started on the video today, um, I apologize for the break that we had on track guides. Had a bit of a family matter come up. My mom had a heart attack, so I was needed elsewhere, and editing videos was the furthest thing on my mind. So she's doing much better now. She's recovering. Her and my dad are doing really well, and so we're back to making guides. So, with that said, thanks for your patience, and welcome back to the PD Rush YouTube channel, where today we're going to take a look at the ARCA car around North Wilkesboro. I really enjoy this track. I feel like I say that a lot. Um, some of the mile and a halves, not so much, but these short tracks are a lot of fun, and especially this one because it has so many really unique characteristics. Where, for example, the front stretch and back stretch are actually not level. The front stretch actually goes downhill and the back stretch points uphill. And the corners are wildly different because of that. So you can't enter the corner the same on both ends of the track. And we're going to talk more about that in a little bit, but that's one of the reasons why I really do enjoy this track. So let's go ahead and pull up the track map here, and we'll talk about that for just a second. So here it is. On paper, it doesn't look, too insane, but as we talked about, the front stretch points downhill. So that makes your entry into turn one really sketchy because you have more weight on the nose of the car already because you're going downhill. And then when you get on the brakes, it really pitches forward. So you don't have a lot of weight on the rear tires, and it really wants to come around on you and get kind of squirrely until it settles into the track and that you're coming out of turn two. And with turn two, it's more of a late apex corner, this whole section here. So you don't want to hug the white line because the track will actually tighten up a little bit on the way out of the corner. So that makes it more difficult. And then you factor in that as you're coming off of turn two, you're starting to travel uphill. So there's a bit more grip, but not quite as much as what you want. So the back of the car can tend to step out on you again. So going through this whole first set of corners through 1 and 2, on entry, the car's going to feel light and kind of loose. As you head towards the middle of the corner, it's going to want to feel like it's going to understeer and not bite into the corner. And then as you meet right about at the center of the turn, it really hooks up. And then you can turn the car down for that late apex and power out. But not too much. You got to be really gentle with your throttle, almost like you've got an egg under that throttle pedal. So then you're on the back stretch, you're pointing uphill. As you come into turn 3, by looking at the track map, you can see it's a little bit more symmetrical of a corner. So you can actually take it more standard, I guess would be the way to put it, where you can hug that bottom line most of the way around the corner. The car will feel loose if you do hug it right on the bottom, and there are a few bumps on the transition to turn 3 and 4. But if you get those right, the car will stick and really power out well for you. If you're not comfortable down there, you can take a little bit of a wider arc that I'll show in a little bit. And that will help you not get so loose, and you'll get the car pointed down so you can have the steering wheel straighter on your way out, and that will actually help. So let's talk brake bias. I run 63% front brake in the car. I know some drivers that run it down at 60 or 61, and I know others that will leave it at 68, which is the default. I found 63 is a good mix for me. It helps you turn the car down into the corner and keep the back end of the car a little bit more lively so that you control your entry more with the steering wheel, but not so much that it gets undrivable as the race goes on, because the grip level falls away pretty massively here and pretty quickly. So one of the things you want to avoid is sliding those rear tires. So if I have the brake bias too far back, then what ends up happening to me is as I go down and like dive down to enter the corner and to set the car in, the back just doesn't stick. So I end up having to wrestle the car, and I usually will slide up a lane or two. And if somebody's on your outside, that's just a recipe for causing an accident. So I kind of split the difference and run 63, and it feels pretty good like that throughout the entire race. Steering ratio I run is 14 to 1. The 10 to 1 here it's too snappy. It feels okay at first, but anytime the rear of the car gets loose, it's very hard to get it back under control with the 10 to 1 steering ratio. So the reason for it this time is not so much saving tires for me, it's more of the drivability as the race goes on. So if you're struggling with that in a later run, try a 14 to 1 or maybe even a 16 to 1 steering ratio and see if that helps. And one thing to note for sure with these cars is that the left rear suspension setup is insanely soft. Like, I mean, pillow soft. If you're driving around the track slow and kind of wiggle the car back and forth, you'll see it just lean on that left rear. And you got to take note of that, because if you do happen to get the car out of shape coming out of the corner and you're trying to control it and straighten it back out, if it does snap a little bit too far and leans down on that left rear, it just feels wonky, and it's kind of hard to keep it straight at that point. That's when you can kind of start that fishtailing, tank slapping thing, and then by that point you might as well just lock it down. Which brings me to the next point. Crashes here. They're weird. they're weird. One of the things that tends to happen is at most tracks, if somebody spins, they kind of tend to slide up if it's in the corner, or if it's on the straightaway like this one, they might slide down the track. For some reason at this track, when people spin, I've noticed they tend to just more or less stay in the line that they're in. They don't really slide up too much, and they don't really slide down the track. They just kind of stay there. So be aware of that as you're coming up to them. If somebody locks the car down because they're spinning, chances are they're just going to continue that spin in the trajectory they're already going, kind of around the track. It's an odd spin here, but that's kind of what happens. So with all that said, now I think it's a good time for us to take a look at the lap, and we are back with cool editing. So we'll have the in-car and the out-car view, and then we will chit-chat about the lap. So coming by us at an 18.614, I'm pretty happy with that lap. That's my best one of the week, definitely. So we'll do our talk through of the lap. So as usual, we're going to make a really wide arc out of turn 4. You don't want to be too low, because then you get loose. So you kind of come down to this, into this second lane here, and that should give you a pretty good run out. Now coming to the line, you'll hit rev limiter, and you kind of begin your turn in right after you pass the line. 30-40% brake pressure, you'll feel the car get loose, kind of let it settle, and then when you feel it tighten back up, turn it in. I like to get back to the power at that point to get that last bit of rotation and kind of throw the car towards the outside wall, and you can even see I'm steering towards the wall there. Now again, lighter on the brakes for this corner, letting the car roll through. You can treat it like your standard corner, except for here where it's going to get loose on the way out because the track's dropping away from you as you come onto the front stretch. Now let's show some less than great lines that I've found this week, specifically in turn 1 and 2. So on those corners, it might seem pretty standard, and if you hug that white line, it might feel really good for the first 2/3 of that corner. and then you're going to feel the car really tighten up on the way out, and you end up putting more steering into the car as you're trying to exit, so it wants to snap loose on you even though it felt tight before. That should be a key to you that that's a later apex corner when you feel that going on. So that's why you want to make that arc really as wide as you can and keep the car in that second groove until you're ready to turn it down like we did in our qualifying lap and power out. So that's kind of showing that that's a later apex corner. Now, in our qualifying lap, obviously we don't care about tires as far as like their longevity or their life or anything, so you're just abusing them as hard as you can for the fastest lap. What you really want to do during the race is try to make this arc as wide as you can down in turn 1 transitioning into turn 2. Turn 3 and 4, I tend to hug the bottom just about the entire race, even though it does get quite loose on the bottom coming out. So if you're struggling, if the car's too loose, just maybe keep it up a lane and try to point it down after that. But that's pretty much what happens to me. So quick recap. Steering ratio, try 14:1, maybe a little bit higher. 63% to 64% brake bias. You can try 62 also. Be wary of your entry into turn 1 because you're pointing downhill, so you don't want the car to get too far out from under you. And make sure that you make a wider arc to hit that late apex of turn 2. Into turn 3, like I said, you can pretty much treat it like your standard corner until the exit, where as the track drops away from you, it's going to get pretty loose as you try to power out. And once again, during the race, try to widen out your arc into turn 1. If somebody does get under you, it is going to be pretty difficult for them to complete that pass, and you'll likely be side by side for several laps. So that's your best bet. You do want to save your front tire a bit. You don't want to burn it off by trying to really hug the bottom line the whole time. Even though, in all honesty, it is quite hard to burn up just your right front on this track. At least I think so, unless you're really overdriving all of the corners. But then you're going to get loose on the way out, so you're going to be killing everything. So that's all I've got for today. I just want to thank everybody for tuning in once again for another track guide. And I hope you learned some more tricks for the track. And if you found something useful, go ahead and give us a subscribe. Hit that bell notification if you like, so you can be notified of future videos and you don't miss them for the tracks that are coming up. And that's it. Thank you. Have a great day. I will catch you all in the next video.